So EA inked a $55 billion acquisition deal that puts Mass Effect 5 in a very dangerous position. There are some potential pros to this deal and a lot of risky cons, like the next Mass Effect getting straight up cancelled, so let's dive into everything, starting with some context. First off, some quick basics. EA is the parent company of BioWare, the studio that's making the next Mass Effect. So since EA has entered this acquisition agreement, that means that there'll be a trickle-down effect to everything Mass Effect related because of this deal. Instead of just answering to the EA executives, BioWare will have to answer to these new owners, which are made up of 3 different investor groups. The first group is PIF, which stands for Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund. The main owners here are the literal government of Saudi Arabia, because it's a state-run fund. The second investor group is Silver Lake, which is a private equity firm also involved in the US's deal to have a majority stake in TikTok. And the final group is Affinity Partners, who is run by Jared Kushner, aka Donald Trump's son-in-law. So yeah, the vibes are very much not good, and in fact are probably 6 feet under. But before going over why these investors are truly the worst case scenario for BioWare, let's go over a bit more context about when the deal will take effect and what the deal itself means. So the deal itself will close in Q1 of fiscal year 2027, which means April to June 2026. Until then, it might be business as usual for BioWare and the next Mass Effect leadership team, but we could see some moves before then. And those moves probably wouldn't be good. It'd likely be more layoffs, which BioWare is unfortunately very familiar with. Alright, now for the nitty-gritty stuff. What the deal itself means. Prior to this acquisition happening, EA was a public company, meaning they answered to public shareholders who expected EA to grow as a company over time, and preferably quarter to quarter. With it now going private, EA will now answer to these new owners instead, which might seem good, but is probably really not. With public companies, journalists are by necessity allowed to ask questions to the head of EA every quarter on what's happening with its studios. This allows for direct access and accountability on where its projects stand, like for example, the next Mass Effect. But now, EA is going to be a private company. This means extremely limited transparency on anything to do with EA's portfolio. When bad news happens, it'll happen suddenly with no warning. We'll basically have to rely on leaks and rumors instead of concrete information, unless EA or BioWare releases it themselves. One of the most dangerous parts of all this for BioWare, though, is something they've dealt with for over a decade. Since 2017, no BioWare release that hasn't been a remaster has performed well by any standard. Their own track record hurts their value as a company, which these new owners might see as a massive red flag. And on top of that, the next Mass Effect is still only in pre-production, with less than 100 employees currently working at BioWare. And BioWare's longtime buildings are being renamed to only be EA's buildings. Things are very much not trending in BioWare's favor. So with all this doom and gloom surrounding EA and BioWare, here's how this acquisition news will actually impact the next Mass Effect. From what we know about the next Mass Effect, it's expected to be a single-player RPG, which historically is the type of game that doesn't bring in a lot of revenue for EA. If these new investor groups want very quick revenue returns, then Mass Effect 5 is screwed. Or it'll be inflicted with what doomed the Veilguard, the dreaded life service curse which never ever ends well. On top of that, this acquisition included about $20 billion in debt financing, which means that EA is about to be in massive debt. So this means that if the next Mass Effect goes ahead, BioWare might be forced to do it on a very reduced budget, which might mean using Gen AI to get the job done. EA CEO Andrew Wilson spoke about his views on Gen AI use within the company, which I'll play for y'all here.
And so as we think about, the first pillar of generative AI for us, we're really looking at how can it make us more efficient? How can it give our developers more power? How can it give them back more time and allow them to get to the fun more quickly? We've done analysis across all of our development processes. And right now, based on our early assessment, we believe that more than 50% of our development processes will be positively impacted by the advances in generative AI.
If over 50% of EA's development processes are going to be impacted, that means Gen AI will definitely be making an appearance in the next Mass Effect. Which again is not good for the devs, the audience, and quite honestly, creativity in general. It's almost as if the heads of EA have never played Mass Effect and seen how the literal bad guys are AI machines out to kill all organic life. You literally can't make this up, y'all. I will never doubt human stupidity ever again. And speaking of stupidity, the dumbest part of all this is that EA might wake up one day and decide to axe BioWare and the pre-production Mass Effect 5 entirely, and no one would blink twice. All because of the deal that EA themselves just signed, which puts all the pressure and danger on the next Mass Effect. And the saddest part is, we don't even know what's happening with the game. With 5 years of teases and no concrete evidence on what they're doing, we have nothing to work with or get hyped about. Cost-cutting and layoffs have hit BioWare hard already. This debt only makes it more likely BioWare's 5-year project will be scrapped entirely, and we might never figure out what any of these teases meant. But somehow, y'all, would you believe me if I said it gets even worse? When we look at the next Mass Effect's release date cycle, it somehow does. Gaming insider Jeff Grubb had this to say about when Mass Effect 5 might come out.
I was told, so when they announced, or when they revealed Dragon Age Dreadwolf in 2018, this is similar in terms of timeline. So now do the math for that, and we're talking 2029 for Mass Effect 5.
Now, with the understanding that these new owners will start calling the shots by halfway through 2026, that puts Mass Effect 5 in a really weird situation. Since the first teaser in 2020, it'll have been in pre-production answering to only EA's executives for about 5 years. And then, if it hits production by or before mid-2026, it might have its final 3 years of development under these new owners. That's really not good, and might result in random plot changes, which is giving me Dragon Age the Veilguard flashbacks already. But here's the really worrying part that honestly, I can't even believe I have to discuss on a channel about video games, but here we are. PIF, Silver Lake, and Affinity Partners are all very much politically entangled and controversial groups that include right-wing extremism. These are groups known for censorship, violating basic human rights, and monitoring people through unethical uses of data. And this is who now controls EA, BioWare, and Mass Effect. Their involvement does not mean good things for the franchise, and quite honestly might result in things like no romance scenes of any kind and a plot that belongs in the 1990s. Entire governments and political figures involved with game companies aren't going to make anything to do with games better. This is really concerning and by far the most dangerous thing that could have happened in the gaming industry, period. But out of all this really sucky news, there is still some good that can come from this. I'm still choosing to believe that the good will win out, like a potential BioWare sale that I'll go over in a bit. If BioWare stays under EA, and if these new investors see Mass Effect 5 as one of the better bets in EA's portfolio, then it'll probably get more funding. This means more hiring in BioWare, better animation, and overall polish for the game. And there are reasons that the next Mass Effect can be seen as one of the better bets. If the game will follow an AI-centered plot again, which I believe is very possible based on the teases, then that would appeal to a very wide audience considering our AI-focused world today. Another pro could be that there's now less shareholder pressure on EA, so maybe BioWare will have more room to breathe before it begins production. Since Mass Effect is also working on a TV series, which PIF loves investing in too, then it could be seen as a desirable franchise with multimedia projects going on. Any little bit of value that Mass Effect can add helps, and the TV show going ahead would be a massive boost. And of course, one of the positives always is that Mass Effect is one of EA's strongest IPs. It's well recognized and embedded in gaming culture, so at the very least, that brand recognition might save the next Mass Effect from being cancelled. Or this could actually lead to the best possible outcome for BioWare since they joined EA. The studio might be sold off to another company or investor group. Mark Dara, a former executive producer at BioWare, spoke on just that on his YouTube channel Mark Dara on Games. In his video, Dara mentioned how the 5% interest rate in America may make it more likely that IPs and studios may be sold off entirely, instead of simply being shut down. This is because EA needs to recoup some of their debt by selling BioWare instead of simply cutting costs, which would honestly be the best thing for Mass Effect and BioWare's future, because as I've covered before, being under EA has been the biggest hurdle for BioWare since they joined the company. As to who could buy BioWare out, Dara commented that maybe companies like Sony or Microsoft would be interested. He also added that there was a very small chance Amazon or Disney could join the fray. The biggest positive to take out of all of this is that Mass Effect and BioWare may finally be free from EA, but of course we'll need to wait for more information. What I'm choosing to do with all this really weird and disheartening news is that we just have to breathe and wait it out. And 7 Day this year will be the true test on how stable things are with Mass Effect under EA, so gear up for one hell of a day then. Until then, if you're looking for the latest update on the Mass Effect TV show's risky direction, then watch this video next on everything we know so far. See ya there.